Hi, Chris, Amy.
Good evening. It's
Hi.
Chris Gibson here.
Hi,
Spider,
Chris.
the Congressman
Spider.
is on, and we're waiting for you to start us off.
Hi, Chris. I'm going to try and get right.
Okay, I'm standing by.
I'm sorry. I was hearing an echo. I'm going to try and get right to business. This is TeamWatch interview with Chris Gibson. Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Yeah, good to be with you.
I realize you're pressed for time. Can you real briefly tell us what is happening right this minute? I hear the vote's been postponed.
Yeah, the vote is postponed. I don't have any knowledge as to when it will occur right now. And but if the bells ring, I will alert you guys to that fact, and we'll make a decision as to whether or not we just stand by for me to get back, or how far we are down in the conference call. But for right now, I'm prepared to have this phone conversation. Looking forward to it.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm going to start with, the most popular question I got sent to me. Believe me, there were a lot of them that got duplicated. But the most popular one seems to be, this keeps getting talked about as if there were actual cuts in spending involved, when in reality, it's a reduction on the increase in spending. Isn't that correct?
Well, that is correct. But these are cuts that are being enacted to the budget. And, when you look at the competing plans out there, this one here, it cuts $1.2 trillion initially, and then an additional $1.8 trillion, all of this over 10 years. Now, keep in mind, this is budget authority that we're talking about. There's two different definitions and terms that you'll hear when you talk about budget figures. You'll hear about budget authority, and then there's budget outlays. And I noticed that some I think it was Brian actually that posted on the Facebook page for our congressional site, and he was posting Senator Rand Paul's comments, and even Ron Paul talking about these things. And what Rand Paul was saying is that essentially these were insufficient cuts, is the point he was making. I think he had said that these plans respectively add $7 and $8 trillion worth of debt over 10 years' time. And that's true. But what Senator Paul did not tell you is the plan that he supported full-throatedly added over $4 trillion worth of debt. So, I mean, the point is that we need to move back to a balanced budget. And when we get there, we need a balanced budget amendment to make sure we don't end back in this same spot we're in right now. So it is true that these plans that we're talking about continue to run deficits and add to the debt. But even the plan that Senator Paul supported did the very same thing. So what we're talking about on the spectrum is what level of cuts that we can actually get enacted. And, I think before we go any further, Spider, I should just give a little bit of background so everybody's on the same page on where we're at. We hit the ceiling for borrowing, which is the current ceiling is at $14.29 trillion. Right around the 16th of May. Since that time, the government has been using auxiliary measures to continue to stay solvent. We're at the point now where the best estimates that we have is that on the 3rd of August, the outflow is going to surpass the inflow. That is to say, the number of bills that we have are going to surpass the number of revenues. Some media reports in recent days as to whether or not that is still the right date. I've heard those media reports too. I have no verification of that. Treasury is still saying that it's the 3rd of August that the number of bills we have, that is to say the dollar figure, will exceed the revenues. What some of you have heard me say is that the President and Senator Schumer and others have talked about the threat that we may not be able to pay Social Security on the 3rd of August. I will tell everybody listening to although I can't say with 100% certainty, I can say with 99% certainty, I don't believe that to be the case. I say that because I've really taken a lot of time to research this and to look at the bills that are going to be coming in day by day throughout August and the revenues that are expected to come in. And it is my belief that we will have enough cash on hand at midnight on the 2nd that when you add the revenues that we're going to get on the 3rd, which is $12 billion, estimated to be about $12 billion, and when you look at the cost for the Social Security payments, which is $23 billion, I believe with about the 99th percentile, I believe we're going to be able to cover the Social Security payments. And so let me state that up front. And the other thing is that you'll see on the internet there's discussion of, well, we're going to have in excess of $200 billion worth of revenue for the federal government in August, and we'll have bills about $350 billion, but we certainly have enough to pay the interest on our bonds. I believe that to be so. I think the odds of a bond default are very, very low. And when you look at the bills that rack up, there is some debate, some argumentation as to what is required, what is prerogative of the administration. My read of this is Social Security is covered by separate statute requiring payment, so that's going to move to the fore when those bills come due. Beyond that, there's talk of what's called prioritization. In fact, that term is often thrown about. Prioritization is the term that's used when we hit the date when the bills that we have exceed the revenues that we have. Now, here's the development that occurred about 5 to 7 days ago that's impacting on this problem is that one of our major credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, put out a statement that said that they were going to downgrade us if we go into prioritization. Now, that was a different assumption than I had a few weeks ago. When you study and watch the statements from the credit rating agencies, the deduction that I made was that if we came through this with a solid agreement, that we would not be downgraded. What we have since then is a clearer picture of what our credit rating agencies are looking for to sustain the AAA rating. What they have communicated is that we need to both avoid prioritization, and that has more to do with stability and certainty and belief that the government can effectively execute prioritization. A lot of skepticism as to whether or not the Obama administration would be able to successfully execute prioritization without major turbulence and disruption throughout American life and with regard to our interaction overseas. So number one, prioritization. Now, S&P is the only agency that said that they would downgrade over prioritization. Moody's has not stated that. Moody's has said that they're waiting to see the final agreement and to assess it. Both S&P and Moody's have said that if the final agreement is not significant and not serious with regard to changing the trajectory of deficit, that we would go from a negative outlook to being downgraded from our AAA rating. I think most everyone is tracking the significance of that. A downgrading of our rating would have adverse impact on interest rates. Rising interest rates, of course, cascade across American life, impact mortgage payments, car payments, student loans, the price of money for businesses taking out capital. And the impact on that would be to put a strain on profitability of business, which really puts small business owners in a tough spot. They have to make some decisions on what they do when their profitability is squeezed. We can expect that would not have a positive impact on employment circumstances. Now, what that means is if with additional pressure on employment, if we see unemployment continue to rise, of course, that's going to mean more outlays for unemployment insurance and for social services attendant thereof. and, of course, less revenues coming in, all inclining towards more debt. So, I mean, the situation we're in is very serious. We've known that. I mean, that's why so many of you are involved, because you understand how serious this is. And so that is the current situation. I have to tell you that a very rare moment occurred last week when, in my estimation, we actually passed something in the House of Representatives that solved the problem. We passed a bill called the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, that I believe would have put us back on course towards a balanced budget, and then implemented a balanced budget amendment. It passed here with bipartisan votes. There were 234 people that voted for it. I was one of them. It went to the Senate, and the Senate tabled it. They didn't even take it up. If you read the press stories on this, what's disappointing is Harry Reid flipped on this. First, he said he was going to give it a full hearing, a full debate. They had every intention of voting it down over there, but they were going to try to expose what they said were the significant flaws. It was going to. They claimed it was going to kill Medicare and all these kind of accusations, which were not. It certainly was not supported by the wording of our bill. A careful read of the 57 pages would have led you in a different direction, but. Senator Reid flipped on that, and he decided to very quickly move to vote to table. The vote requirement to table is 51 votes, and they received 53 votes. And cut, cap, and balance was never taken up for debate. So that put us in a tough spot over here, recognizing the severity of the situation. Given what S&P had said as far as downgrade attendant to prioritization, we here over last weekend, the bipartisan leadership of the House and Senate sat down together and began to put on paper something they thought could move through both chambers to avoid the potential of a default. Again, I would tell you that a bond default is the chances that are very, very, very low. But really, the prioritization and all the negative effects associated with that, they started to put on paper an agreement that would have averted the crisis. That is to say, both avoided prioritization and implemented the necessary structural reforms that would ensure, or at least put us in the best position to avoid a downgrade of our credit rating. From what was communicated to me, at a certain point the president got involved and was very upset when he heard what was going on, and basically gave Senator Reid marching orders to cease and desist and move in another direction. Now, we took that as far as we got it on the weekend, and we put in paper what was communicated at that table. So what you see today that's before the House is a bill that's fashioned and informed with the principles of cut, cap, and balance, but it is not cut, cap, and balance. I want to be very clear on this. This is not a desirable bill, and it's not even a solution. But what it is what's something that we thought that we could get through both houses to avert the crisis and put us on the road towards the solution. So. And now I can describe it if you want me to describe the bill, Spider, or I can stand by.
Well, quick question if I can.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with a letter from David Beers from Standard & Poor's that went to Congress?
I believe I am. I've read all kinds of correspondence. If you were talking about the $4 trillion,
I'm talking about the one that says that no matter what we do, we're more than likely to lose our AAA rating anyway.
No, that's not what we're tracking here. Now, one of the things that's also problematical about Standard & Poor's is they've put out about 3 different stories in the last week. Our outlook had moved to negative. There was always the possibility. There's always that possibility that we could be downgraded. That is clearly there. But I want to think it was 4 or 5 days ago, we got a statement from Standard & Poor's and said they were looking for a figure around the $4 trillion mark as far as debt restructuring and dollar figure. Now, last night there were communications from S&P that said that it wasn't so much the dollar for dollar is that they wanted to see a meaningful effort by the Congress to change the trajectory of our debt, and they also said that the plans that were being discussed could very well make the mark as far as not having a downgrade. So I will tell you that I've gotten mixed messages from Standard & Poor's over the past week to 10 days. Now, Moody's has been pretty clear. They said they're not going to make any assessment until they see what comes out of all this in relation to how they think the direction that we're heading. So with that said, I mean, what we put together is, when I say it adheres to the principles of cut, cap, and balance, let me quickly lay this out. Cut. The first thing is we went to the area where there was agreement. Because some may say, well, why is it the Republicans are doing this? Why are you doing this again before the election? I mean, why are you doing the short-term agreement? That is not desirable. But it's driven by the fact that those are the only cuts that we have agreement on. We have said, we've made a couple of points. We have said that we do not want to raise the debt ceiling beyond that which is cut. We want to have at least dollar for dollar because we think that's important to communicate to the rating agencies that we're serious about changing this debt. And so far, we've only agreed, Democrats and Republicans have only agreed to about $1.2 trillion in budget authority in terms of cuts. And so what we said is, lacking the agreement of the I think the president wanted 2.4 was his estimate to get him beyond the election, is what he's consistently said. We said, well, we don't have agreement on that. But what we can do is we will put on paper the cut. We'll put the 1.2 that we've agreed to, we'll put that on paper, but we're not going to give you credit. We're not going to raise it 1.2 because you didn't give us the whole thing at once, so we'll raise it 900 for the 1.2 trillion in BA, budget authority. Now, when this was scored by the CBO, the budget authorities remained pretty well constant. But the outlays, that's how much you can spend. That's how much that the government can actually get spent in the decade, came back somewhere in the figure about $850 billion in terms of cuts. So at that point, the leadership went back and said, that's not going to be good enough. We want to go back and get more budget outlay cuts. And so that's why you had that 24-hour delay. They came back, and now the budget outlay is $917 billion. Now, keep in mind, it's still approximately $1.2 trillion in budget authority. That's how much your government can spend. But in terms of that is how much legal authority they have to spend. But how much they can actually get spent inside the decade, when you look at the cuts there, they're $917 billion. It's a bit technical and complicated, but that's what the White House has been using, just so we have apples to apples. And by the way, the Senate has been budget authority. So when you see the figure of 917, keep in mind that's an orange. I mean, that's not apple to apple. That's budget outlays. So anyways, the reason why we have a two-phased approach to this is because what we do in the first phase is we go ahead and make the cuts that we've agreed to. And then what we do is we say we want another $1.8 trillion in cuts, but we want that to be worked out, and this is where we made concessions to the Democrats. There's a couple of key concessions that we made to the Democrats last weekend to get this bill informed by cut, cap, and balance. On the cut side, the Democrats wanted a committee that comprised of 3 House Dems, 3 House Republicans, 3 Senate Republicans, and 3 Senate Democrats. We put that in the bill based on their request. Now, keep in mind, there was a lot of discussion among the leadership about who needed to be on that committee. And I will just tell you that conservatives here in the House felt confident that we were going to put the right kind of people based on the names that were mentioned, which really, it's not my style to publicly disclose that. But I will just tell you that I felt comfortable when I started hearing the names that I heard on the House and Senate that these were the right kind of folks that were going to be on this committee for us. So
now this committee, this is the Super Congress Committee.
That's right. That's right. They are elected representatives who are going to be part of this joint committee to identify $1.8 trillion in cuts, and they need to do it by Thanksgiving, thereabouts, because the additional borrowing authority is estimated to expire sometime in January or early February. So what you see going on right now, if we're able to get this thing through the House, Senate, and the President signs it, is you will see an immediate $1.2 trillion in cuts, but then the identification of $1.8 trillion in cuts, and at that point, the President will have the debt ceiling raised to the point where it's outside the 2012 window. But I wanted to clear that up because some are just trying to spin that as a political thing. It's not. It's because we don't have agreement on the cuts. There's one other piece that you should know as far as concessions. The Democrats wanted, as a priority, they wanted to address Pell Grants. So we went to work on that. And so with some restructuring of the program and some plus-up, there's $17 billion in this agreement for Pell Grants, and that came to work with in good faith with the Democrats. So when Senator Reid now says, "Oh, we're all against this," and I mean, look, we sat at the table with these guys. I'm getting this now from our leadership, but our leadership sat at the table with them and worked out these cuts and worked out these arrangements. So that's what you see on the cut side of it. On the cap, this is important. Look, the best caps are the ones that are in cut, cap, and balance. When I say best caps, the caps that are in cut, cap, and balance actually comport with spending levels in relation to GDP. That's ultimately what we need. We need caps that actually are guide rails that bring us back below 20% of federal spending, and then we need the balanced budget amendment. If we put those together, the 21st century will be yet our greatest century if we can get that through. But that's not the cap we have in this version today. Okay, but it is a hard cap. I want you to know that what we have in this is a hard cap, in that, but it's based on discretionary spending amounts. That's the cap you have in this version here today. But then you say, well, that's not enough. Well, yes, it's not enough. That's true, but it's better than what's in the Reid proposal. What we have in terms of caps is that any change, and Spider, you've asked this question to me before in town hall meetings, well, how do we know that future Congresses aren't just going to change this? Well, what we put into law is that any kind of movement on this agreement would need 60 votes in the Senate. So that's as hard a cap as we can get in this bill, and we have it in the bill. So it's not the cap we want, but it's a harder cap that's in the Reid plan. Finally, balance. Go ahead.
That's a good point. I'd like to comment on that. Do you remember the Tea Parties from the first 2 years, where 95% of the signs that people were carrying said "Obey the Constitution"? Right. Okay. They've been ignoring the Constitution for the last 100 years. What exactly is supposed to make us feel good enough to believe that a new constitutional amendment is going to be good enough? Now, I do agree it's something that Tea Party should want and makes sense, but the reality is they've been ignoring the Constitution for 100 years. Why are they going to start listening now?
Well, I think what it comes down to is facially unconstitutional and argumentatively unconstitutional. The onus on the facially unconstitutional, I read these bills and I make decisions on their constitutionality before I cast them. Still, I mean, your point is well made, because I voted on a couple of measures here that I think are facially unconstitutional. I voted no, and they still passed. So our backstop is the courts. Now that cuts both ways. The courts, on the one hand, uphold the Constitution, but on the other hand, they interpret the Constitution, and we have case law now that we've been living with, particularly since the 1930s, that has taken a very expansive interpretation of the General Welfare Clause. Now, look, we cannot dismiss that. I mean, this is our system was set up that way. We had an independent judiciary. It was mostly philosophical at the founding. We actually instantiated it. We were different from other countries. Most other countries at the time of the founding, the judiciary was actually an arm of the executive, an arm of the king. And we made ours independent, and we gave them the power to interpret the Constitution. So when we had judges that made these decisions, rendered these decisions that expanded the general welfare clause and the necessary and proper, I mean, these have the full effect of constitutionality just based on their decision. Not to say that the courts can't flip over time, but it's happened very rarely. You had Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, that was turned with Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka. You had the Dred Scott decision that was eventually overturned, and actually mostly by the new amendments that came after the Civil War. But there are not a lot of examples where the courts have actually flipped on where they were. Mostly these are shades of gray and gradations that occur over time. So I guess what I would tell you, Spider, is the Constitution is still very much alive and well, and it's a matter of us in the legislative branch, the people, and through the executive as who gets appointed to the court in terms of how it's going to be interpreted over time. I think this balanced budget amendment, I will tell you that it is the single biggest thing that I want to see get done and the most meaningful legacy that any member of Congress, and in the time that I'm here, that's the one thing that I want to get done. Because, I think these caps will put guide rails and get us back towards a balanced budget, but I don't want my children to have to deal with this again. And so what did our bill have? Look, the cut, cap, and balance from last week was a better bill in this regard. It required that we pass out of the House and Senate to the states before we raised the debt ceiling. That got tabled. What we have in this, though, is the requirement for a vote by the 1st of October. Now, of course, that's not as good as the cut, cap, and balance, but it's still important because there hasn't been a vote in the Senate on a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution since 1995. It failed by one vote then. It was close. And it actually got over 300 votes here in the House. Now, if we can get this thing through tonight, we're due to vote on two versions of the balanced budget amendment tomorrow here in the House of Representatives. And, now what will happen in those votes? It's hard to say, but I'll just tell you this. Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn, they voted for the balanced budget amendment in 1995. It got 302 votes or something like that. So,
yeah, and against it a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I mean, the significance. We have had certainly challenges moving this issue, but I got to tell you, if we can get this in. When you say voted against it, they voted against the cut, cap, and balance. But I'm talking about a standalone vote tomorrow. If we can get this thing through tonight, the plan is to bring standalone votes on a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget tomorrow. And I would tell you that if we can get 290, that's what we need. That will put pressure on the Senate. Remember who's up for an election. When you look at this class, this is the class of 2006 that came in, quite a number of what are considered moderate Democrats that came in. I think that we help make our case. And by the way, by having the vote, there is some virtue having the vote sometime on or about the 1st of October because we can get the American people involved in putting the word out to their senator to vote for the balanced budget amendment, because the balanced budget amendment polls strongly. Hey, you got 2/3 of the American people, because that's the way we live at home. We live within a balanced budget. So although we're disappointed that it's not the cut, cap, and balance version, to have this bill tonight requires a vote. And some may say, well, big deal, requires a vote. But remember, Senator Reid doesn't want his senators to take the vote. He hasn't had one.
No, and he's promised that no matter what Congress votes for, he's going to kill it when it gets to the Senate, right?
Right. Well, he said that, and I guess we're ready for that part of the discussion because I think I've laid out for you the bill tonight, the cut cap.
You have, and I would like to move forward with it. Amy has a quick question she would like to ask if she's prepared to speak.
I am. Thank you, Spider. Congressman, you did give us a lot of information. I was just hoping that, because we do have a lot of constituents on the line who tend to get a little bit lost, myself included, could you just clarify in very simple terms how the cut, cap, and balance differentiates from this Boehner plan, which you'll be voting on tonight? In just very simple terms, please, if you
Okay, I'll go right through it. Cut in the cut, cap, and balance, which is the desirable one. That's the one we passed last week. I believe it's the solution to the problem we have. The cut in that version had $111 billion immediately, right up front, which pretty much comports with our budget, our Republican budget. The cut in this version here has $22 billion, so that's down in the first year cut. But again, remember, this was worked out at the table among Democrats and Republicans with the intent of getting it through, having enough support for it to actually not only get through the House and the Senate, but to get to the desk and then put the pressure on the president to sign it. Now, with regard to cuts over 10 years. The cut, cap, and balance version, the one from last week, had $5.8 trillion worth of cuts. This one has $3 trillion. So that's the difference on the cut aspect. Plus, there's a couple tweaks that the Democrats asked us to put in, the Joint Committee, the Pell Grant piece of it. So that's the difference on cut. On cap, on the cut, cap, and balance version, we actually had caps that are related to GDP, not related to discretionary spending levels. So what you have in the cut, cap, and balance is, that I think I've talked about it with many folks, is that we're actually spending very ill-disciplinedly right now. We are in excess of 24, approaching 25% federal spending in relation to GDP. And, I mean, anyone who studies this knows this is unsustainable. We're on a disaster trajectory right now. And what we would have done in cut, cap, and balance is brought it down over time back below 20%. That's in the bill, guide rails that get us back. Now, in our bill, it's not in relation to GDP. These are hard caps into discretionary spending that can be done over the next decade, with the idea that the $1.8 trillion from the Joint Committee would also be looking at the mandatory spending and the entitlement programs going forward. So that's the difference between caps. The balance. In the cut, cap, and balance version, we had the requirement that the balanced budget amendment be reported out from the House and Senate to the states, where it would require 3/4 of the states to ratify before it became an amendment to the Constitution, whereas in this version here tonight, it requires a vote by the 1st of October. So I think it's clear for everybody to see that we have a suboptimal version of it, but it's still informed by the principles of cut, cap, and balance and worked out at the table between Democrats and Republicans. What's disappointing is now, as you hear Senator Reid saying, oh, no, there's no support for it. We don't want to stand with that. Remember, he's getting pressured by the president. The president fundamentally wants to get this done so that he doesn't have to deal with it again until after the election. And we're not opposed to that from a political standpoint. We're opposed from it because we don't have agreement on the level of cuts necessary before we give that kind of raising authority.
Is there something that we could trade? You could trade. For instance, could you trade putting raising the debt ceiling? I'm not saying I'm in favor of this. Could you trade raising the debt ceiling past the election in order for the real cuts that you really wanted? Give him what he wants as long as he gives us something really, really good.
Yeah, you know what I think? The thing that, talking to allies here, the one thing that we all agree would be a game changer is a balanced budget amendment. And because, that would be the forcing function to actually to get us back to where we need to be. And, that's in worst case scenarios, I don't want to get too much into wargaming here, but But
right. You don't want to tip your, show your cards. Right?
But going forward, I'll just tell you that we've looked at this thing strategically, and what we want to do is we want the structural change. That's the problem. See, look, the Reid plan. First of all, you need to know the thing about the Reid plan is you got apples to oranges issues. Some of the reporting was it was $2.7 trillion in cuts. Look, I mean, there's $1 trillion in cuts that they counted from winding down the war. Now, we're going to wind down the war, but we didn't count that in our savings. If you're going to go apples to apples, ours is $3 trillion, theirs is $1.7 trillion. Unless you want to give them credit for that, and then it's 2.7 and it's 4 for us, depending on how you want to count it. But and then they have the 1.2 trillion in the cuts that we've agreed to. Our levels of cuts are more significant than theirs, even though they're trying to portray ours as smaller because ours is in the 2 phases. We have the first phase, 1.2, and then it's the 1.8 the Joint Committee has to work on. Then the caps, they really don't have. There are no hard caps that I've seen unless they've revised it today. They don't have the kind of surety that we want, that future Congresses can easily get out of that. And then there's no talk of a balanced budget amendment at all in Reid. So we think as plans go, even though ours is a compromise, we think our version here tonight is superior to theirs because at least it's informed by the principles of cut, cap, and balance. Now, I got to tell you, I feel so strongly about cut, cap, and balance that if we could get it through and the president signed it, to me that'd be a game changer. I mean, I will tell you that if we got cut, cap, and balance through, I think many of you have heard me say before. I'm going to put a finer point on something you've heard me say before. I always get asked about tax increases, revenues. I've always said that we have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. And we're spending close to 25% of GDP, federal spending in relation to GDP. I've said we once we get our spending under control, if we're still having trouble balancing our budget, then I think everything needs to be on the table because it's that important. It's that important to our children that we get this budget balanced. I mean, I'll tell you, you want to talk about trade-offs. I think if the president ever agreed to cut, cap, I mean the full, I'm talking about the real deal, cut, cap, and balance, I think we'd have to talk about seriously putting on, maybe those who make over $1 million a year, we could let the taxes sunset. I'm talking about something really serious. I'm talking about something that would approach what they talk about the grand bargain, because
you're talking about something that's been the president's goal like forever is the millionaire tax, and you do know that none of your constituents are going to support that.
Well, what I'm saying is that the cut, cap, and balance, Spider, is such a game changer. I mean, if we can, I'm talking about, you have to think. You just got to think that if we can get the guide rails to get back to a balanced budget, and if we can have a balanced budget amendment, and if we're still having issues balancing the budget, then I think I'm willing to look big stuff, because what we want to get done, we want to get this done. Now, what I'm telling you is that I don't believe in raising taxes now, because if we raise taxes right now, we would spend it. You look at the trajectory, you'll hear folks yell for tax increases. If we raise taxes right now, we wouldn't fix the problem. All we would do is spend it. What I'm saying is that if we ever got the Senate to agree to fix our spending problem and actually get it back in line and to get the president to sign it, the real deal, cut, cap, and balance, I think that would be worth talking about big stuff with them.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a hard cap, and it's going to take 60 votes to make any new spending pass in this proposed bill. Wasn't that the original?
No. The 60 votes means they can't break the deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, until they get the 60 votes. But wasn't that the original thought with Obamacare, and then they changed the rules after Scott Brown got elected because they no longer had the 60 votes?
No. See, that was different. What they used was called the reconciliation process. That reconciliation process, by the way, was used by President Bush. I mean, when you know,
well, I'm not saying that one party is better than the other. Or one
no. I'm saying that
I just want to deal with individuals and specifics here, not in the abstract.
No, but I think I understand. What I want to clarify is that the people's tax cuts, they didn't get 60 votes for them. They used the reconciliation process, and they had to use the budget to do it. Because some may wonder why did they sunset the tax cuts for 10 years? It's because they couldn't get the 60 votes. Because some people say, well, Bush never intended. You may have heard the argument they never intended them to be permanent. That's not really true. They did intend for them to be permanent, but they couldn't get a vehicle to get it done. They used the budget process, which allowed them to use the reconciliation device, which then allowed them to skip the 60 votes. Now, that's what they used for health care. They used the reconciliation process, and ultimately they were able to get around the 60 vote. That's why all of us yelled, we cried foul. We said, wait a minute. You're not reconciling the budget. How did you do that? And they used
so what,
this
what
would
you're
not.
Saying,
they couldn't do that for them.
They couldn't do, okay, all right.
No, because this is in statute that it's explicitly about this agreement as it relates to deficit reduction. It's explicitly written, so they wouldn't be able to use. That's why we call it a hard cap, is that they wouldn't be able to get around that.
Okay, now try and bear with me. I'm trying to field a billion questions coming in through my email. One of these questions wants to know where, since we did speak, I'm going to bounce around a bit. You spoke about the Super Congress, quote unquote. Where is the constitutional authority for something like that to be created?
I would tell you that you go to Article 1, where it talks about the Congress can make its own rules and it can organize. I believe that's your constitutional authority right there.
Okay. Ron Paul has an interesting temporary solution to the debt ceiling, which is to make $1.6 trillion magically disappear because the Federal Reserve has already paid it off by buying those notes back. Is that being discussed at all, or is that something that just made a headline and vanished?
I'm getting to know Ron pretty well. I sit with him often on the floor. I'll be candid with you. I don't fully understand what he's communicating there. I really just need to sit with him and understand that a little bit better. He has not mentioned it to me the last few times we sat together, and I just don't feel like I'm an expert enough to comment on that. I think my staff is listening, and they can take a note on that,
okay,
and I can inquire.
I don't know is a fair answer. How much during this particular bill, what we're going to call is the Boehner bill, how much actually gets cut this year?
It's $22 billion.
$22 billion.
Yes.
Over.
Now, keep in mind, it's this year. Now, keep in mind, we've actually already done it. Here's the thing that's frustrating for us is you probably heard me say, last year was the first time since 1974 that the Congress didn't pass a budget, and they didn't pass any appropriations bills either. So when we got sworn in, the first thing we had to do was clean up that. We had to clean up their mess, and we went through that whole drill. 24 hours after closing the books on their stuff on 2011, we brought forward our budget for 2012, and we got an ass whooping. By the liberals came out now, saying this. Look, this is what you sent us here to do. We passed a budget that reflects what the will of the American people was. Now, when the budget then informs the appropriations process, and Spider, for the last 7 weeks. Each week, we have been bringing an appropriations bill to the floor, and every one of them but one has cut. Every appropriations bill that's come before this House of Representatives has cut spending, except for the DOD bill, which was a mistake. The president sent it over here. He tried to add $30 billion. The Congress was proud that they cut 13 of that billion off the president's request, but they added $17 billion. And as much as it pained me to do it, I voted no on the DOD approps bill because we should be cutting defense too. So I was one of 87, but every other appropriations bill, there's 6 others that have come before this House of Representatives, we've cut. So when we talk about cutting $22 billion, we've already done the work. The problem is the Senate hasn't moved any of it. So we get the work done, and then if nothing else, what this bill could do is it gets the Senate to agree to it, because if they don't agree to this, what's going to happen is come mid-September, all the work that we did, and we're going to do them all. We're committed to doing all 12 bills. And every week that we bring one of these bills to the floor, the Democrats, they've been fighting us on every single cut. Every single cut, they fight us. And what's going to happen is if the Senate doesn't move these appropriations bills, you're going to start hearing a talk about an omnibus, because they haven't moved any appropriations bills, so we don't have a budget for next year, even though we've done all the work. So, when I told the Speaker and the leadership, I said, you know what, when they start asking for an omnibus, we ought to just package up all the work we've done for the last 3 months, put a bow on it, and tell them that's our omnibus, because we've already done the work. And the fact that we'd have to go back and do another H.R. 1 when we've already done the work, it really is frustrating to me. But, that's part of sometimes people ask me, what have you learned? What are you frustrated about? One of the things that frustrates me is we've been doing an appropriations bill a week down here, and we can't get the Senate to do an appropriations bill. They haven't done a budget, and I wonder why we pay them. But that's what's going on. So when I talk about cutting $22 billion, we're doing the work right now. It's not theoretical. We're actually all these. When you see the attacks on me and others in the media for cutting, it's the weekly appropriations bill. So all we need to do is put a bow on it now and say, this is part of the agreement. Now you've agreed to it. Now we don't have to fight you at the end of September in an omnibus, because you've already agreed to it in the Budget Act, in the as you're calling it, the Boehner bill.
It was just the easiest way to describe it. Your campaign, during your campaign, you had one of the things that you wanted to try and do, one of your goals, was to get rid of DHS. How close are you to actually doing that, so that we might be able to, there's one agency that we no longer have to pay for. How close are you doing?
I'm not close. I have talked about it down here. There's very little interest. Here's what I have gotten done. I had an amendment put in the Intelligence Authorization Bill that requires the Director of National Intelligence to provide recommendations on consolidation of the intel community. The intel community has tripled since 9/11, and in my view now, it actually is less effective. You take a look. If anybody has any doubts on this, you can Google Dana Priest, that's D-A-N-A, Priest, spelled conventionally, and then put intelligence. You will see a series of articles that appeared last summer in the Washington Post. You got to sit down when you read it. It's and I believe it. Given my experiences, we got significant issues with our intelligence community. We have significant issues with our DOD. And what I got in the Intel Authorization Bill is I believe it empowers the Director of National Intelligence to do something that we never really gave him the authority to do. We created more big government after 9/11. I think we should have went another direction. We should have actually consolidated. We should have added by subtraction, but we didn't. We added another layer, the DNI. But even now, if you were to go all throughout the district and ask constituents who's the highest-ranking intel officer in the country, I'd tell you probably half or two-thirds of the folks would say the CIA director. Except for it's not true. It's actually the DNI. So what we did in the amendment is we're asking the DNI for his recommendations on consolidation of the intel community. We have dozens of agencies out here that are involved in the work of intelligence. That made its way through the House. It passed the Senate, and the President signed it into law. General Clapper, who's the Director of National Intelligence, came over here. He visited me. He said, I came here to learn about my homework assignment. We had about an hour discussion here about all of this. We agreed on a considerable amount. We didn't agree on everything. He said, I'm going to have to go back and talk to the President. I got to find out how comprehensive he wants this to be. But that's what we've got done there. In the DOD, that is to say the National Defense Authorization Act, I had a series of amendments put in there too. I didn't get everything I was wanting to get done. Those, I have to be candid with you. I have not gleaned or I've not built a strong coalition yet for significant national security establishment reform, but there are people listening to me, and I've had some, pretty high-level meetings about it. I was able to get an amendment into the NDAA that requires the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to provide a report on roles and missions. That's important because normally that's done by the SecDef, and I wanted to get some civilian military interplay there, some different points of view, with the intent of trying to inform hearings about national security establishment reform. I also got an amendment in that same bill for the Special Operations Command. I firmly believe, based on my experiences, that if we flatten the intel organization and then fuse it, intel and ops, will be both more effective and it'll cost less money. So I've got a provision in the NDAA bill that does that as well. So, look, I know that it took 4.5 years to get Goldwater Nichols done. That was the last time we had significant reform in 1986 and 87 is when it culminated. But I've got the process started. I had a chance to talk to leadership about this yesterday. I'm also working executive legislative branch relationships as a component of this. That's the War Powers Reform Act. The War Powers Reform Act has been introduced. I had a hearing. Ron Paul was at the hearing. He seemed to have been very impressed by it. Others, I've gotten a lot of good feedback. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten the markup yet. And part of it is we're dealing with all this right here, but I'm trying to build the momentum to get a markup in the House Foreign Affairs Committee because I think the Reform Act would be vitally important to bringing back in line the presidential war powers that have become so overdrawn, particularly since the 1970s. So anyways, these are the things that I have been able to get done. And I would tell you that all of that would be a precursor to actually making a run at DHS. And by the way, General Clapper, he's the Director of National Intelligence. He stridently disagreed with me on the DHS thing. But, I mean, like I said, we agreed on more stuff than we disagreed. So I've got my work cut out for me on that.
Okay. Good grief. How many, we're having a problem, again, apparently arguing about where we're going to cut. The Democrats, I'm sure, would be happy to cut anything they can from defense. Do you have a number of how many offshore military bases the United States is currently
It's over 100. It's well over
100. The Google information that I've found is anywhere between 600 and 1,700. And the interesting thing about that is there are only 196 countries on the planet. So it sounds like, if my math is correct, we could legitimately have 5 bases in every country on the planet.
Yeah, I can't verify that number, but I can tell you that in terms of significant bases, it's over 100. I say significant where you have multiple formations, you have a command and control element there. I think that's got to be part of national security establishment reform, and for a couple of reasons. One is I don't believe it makes us safer. I think that we evidence an empire, and track record on empires is not good.
I was actually going to comment on that because the next thing I was going to say is this sounds kind of like an invasion. The United States is invading the entire planet.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, some of this stuff, are you kidding? I mean, some of this stuff is actually wanted by we have 4 brigade combat teams in Europe. And look, I mean, it's possible I got this wrong, but Europe isn't going to get invaded anytime soon. And those brigade combat teams don't need to be there. And they need to come home, and we can help restructure the force. But part of the reason they're there is because the Europeans like them there. It's not just the status; it's the economic driver. And this is what we have to get out of. We have this belief that there's a symbiosis there, that they're getting something out of it, and we're getting forward presence. Look, we're not going to take everything. I mean, we'll probably want to leave an air base here and there, but we don't need to keep brigade combat teams stationed in Europe. And once we get through this latest phase in Korea, it may take another year or 2. We'll have to see how this thing plays out, but we don't need that presence in Korea either. Over time... Go ahead.
Sorry. In a number of your town hall meetings, you've made a comment about our foreign bases being, well, for lack of a better explanation, it's basically welfare on a planetary scale. We're just pouring money. Our soldiers are spending their American money in foreign countries just to increase the flow of cash into these other countries. We don't need these people there. Can't we, as part of your negotiations, cut, I don't know, at least a couple of these foreign bases?
Well, what's underway is the DOD does have a review process in place, and perhaps throwing me a bone. They talked about in the near term there may be a brigade or two that comes out of Europe. We'll see what comes out of their latest study. I voted for an amendment in the DOD appropriations bill. In the DOD appropriations bill, which I want to think was 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was called the POLIS, P-O-L-I-S amendment in the DOD appropriations bill, and that would have brought the troops home from Europe. It did not pass. I want to think there were maybe roughly 150 of us that were on that amendment. So, there's some political work to be done to build a consensus. But if nothing else, we sent the message to the DOD that the people's representatives here want to see you get on with it. We want to see what the executive branch's recommendation is with regard to troops in Europe. I believe it needs to be broader than that. I think we need a comprehensive look at our footprint in relation to what an appropriate level of defense is to protect a republic. I have a major challenge ahead of me because I think we're in denial. I think we could all pass a civics test that we're a republic, but we evidence an empire, and just getting people to recognize that is a challenge here. I don't know. I mean, I think among the crowd on this phone call, I think you guys get it. But I have to tell you that I get pushback on that. Even Fred Dicker. Some may have heard me on Fred Dicker. I'm going back like 3 or 4 months ago. But I had this discussion with him, and he says, "What do you mean an empire?" Well, we don't have this, and that's. I said, Fred, look. I mean, we've got outposts everywhere, and we consistently get involved in the Byzantine affairs and of foreign countries. So I only bring it up to say that I've got work to do to get people to see, what is happening, and B, how that's not in our interests. So, my plate is full here. We're certainly got to get through this current situation right here, and then going forward, I have a full agenda that is really focused on the 3 broad priorities: creating jobs, moving back to a balanced budget, and protecting freedoms. And in the national security establishment reform, broadly defined, by the way, which includes the intelligence community, the Homeland Security, the DOD, when I talk about national security establishment reform, I bundle all those together. Okay.
Okay. Let's say, for instance, that this again, quote unquote, Boehner bill. Actually, there's a pretty good chance, you say, from what I heard in the news, there's only 2 or 3 votes shy in Congress. If it does magically get passed in the Senate, this is a 10-year proposal. At the end of 10 years, what would our deficit be?
I got to tell you, we're not done. I can give you an answer. The answer is 21 trillion, but I got to tell you that doesn't work. Since we got here, we have been cutting. We said we'd do that. Every week we bring a bill to the floor that cuts. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them die in the Senate, but that's what I mean, that this is only the beginning. I mean, what we're doing is, just to give a little perspective, I'm 47. I think this is the 74th time since I've been alive that we've raised the debt ceiling. This is the first time in history that we've ever raised it, and I'm assuming we're successful. This is the first time in history we've ever raised the debt ceiling with cuts. More than that, to me, it's important we not only get cuts, but we get structural reforms. This has never happened. When we closed out the end of the fiscal year in April, that cleaned up the mess from the last Congress, with that cut, which was $39 billion from last year's spending, from last year's spending level, $79 billion from the president's mark, but $39 billion in budget authority from the previous year, that was the largest cut in American history. I mean, that was unprecedented, even in as much as we all knew that we had only moved a yard in a 100-yard game. But it still was the largest one, so we're not going to tire. We know what needs to be done. It's frustrating to us. It's true. I mean, like I said, I mean, even as a student of history, the cut, cap, and balance is what we need. We know that would be the solution, but we didn't get it. But we're not. Although I'm frustrated, you know, I'm not. I don't want you to think that I'm disheartened. There's a difference. You know, frustrated means that we didn't reach our goal. But we're going to keep every morning that I rise, whether if I get 3 hours or 6 hours sleep, you know, I'm focused on getting this done. And even now, I know I'm taking an ass whooping from some folks about, you know, this isn't cut, cap, and balance, and this is, I get it. But you know what? I came here to make a difference, to help create jobs and move us back to a balanced budget. And given what I see out there, if we don't get this done, I think this is the best agreement. And there's no guarantee we're even going to get it. But this is the best agreement we're going to get, and we need to get after it. And I would tell you, the help that you guys can do is if we get this through tonight, we gotta get the message, and you'll hear me on Chuck and Kelly tomorrow. We've got to put the pressure on the Senate to actually pass this thing. I mean, Reed was talking about taking it up tonight and voting it down, because I don't think he wants to deal with the media cycle of the American people telling them, okay, we got a solution now, so stop, you know, telling us the sky is falling. You keep telling us these Social Security checks are not going to go out. They just gave you the answer. I don't know if you noticed that. They're talking about trying to take it up right away and then vote it down. My view on it is because they don't want to deal with the media cycle. That the American
I absolutely did. I absolutely did get it, and I thought I brought it up, but I think we all realize that that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So I'm going to do my part. I'm going to get on Chuck and Kelly tomorrow. I've done a whole bunch of media. You should see some stuff in the paper tomorrow.
Let me ask you, knowing that we've got, you know, Kiki Gillibrand and, good grief, Chuck Schumer, these are the types of people that, you know, we're dealing with. Our phone calls aren't very effective when we call these people. Is there anything we could say to help convince them that we have some kind of ammunition that we can use against them, something that will turn the people against them?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair point that you raised as far, but, you know, I have to say that, you know, that's what the president tried to do. That's why he told everybody to call Congress, is because it wasn't so much calling Congress. I mean, although that's always good, it was the media story. What this is really, this is a major orchestrated effort to try to get a narrative across about how we should proceed. And, you know, what we have to do is really say, look, we get it. We know this is a serious issue. We've been saying that, matter of fact. And we just passed something that we don't even think is ideal. You guys keep, I mean, I'm playing the sort of the, you know, given the narrative here, but, you know, the media is trying to portray us as we're not flexible, we're dogmatic. Look, if we were dogmatic, it would be cut, cap, and balance. That is the answer. But we're saying, look, we know that this is serious, and we don't want to see the interest rates rise. We don't want to see unemployment. We know that hardworking Americans are counting on us to get this done so they don't lose their job, have to pay more. We understand that. That's why we're willing to bring forward this bill. We didn't bring forward this bill for any other reason but for that. And what we need now is we need the American people to really to support us and say, look, 2/3 of the people supported cut, cap, and balance. People want a balanced budget amendment. And how we can help is not only our media, but if we can get these balanced budget amendments passed, if we can at least get one of the two versions passed on Friday. It's tomorrow, right? Yeah, tomorrow. If we can get it through. If we can get this Budget Control Act tonight, we're going to vote on balanced budgets tomorrow, and that will keep the pressure on, because the American people say, look, they passed a balance. They passed a plan to avert the crisis, and then they passed a balanced budget amendment. Come on, Senate. You haven't done anything. The Senate hasn't given...
That's a great point. That's a great point. A lot of Americans that I'm getting, tons of emails from while we're talking, a lot of people are thinking that you're bowing down. Why not? Since you do seem to have some sort of at least on the surface, you seem to have some sort of bargaining power. Why not use it? Hold the line. Say, we want this cut, cap, and balance because this is the last deal we're going to give you.
Well, look, here's the thing on this is that given where we are right now, this bill is out. The cut, cap, and balance they tabled. What we did here is we fashioned a bill that adheres to the principles, even though it's not the cut, cap, and balance version, but we put it together with Democrats. So, I mean, when they keep saying that we're going to default, even though we know it's not going to be a bond default, it is going to be a
prioritization, which is going to cause
the trigger. So, and we get all that, and that's the whole point. Is that you think about the folks on this call, and the folks in MoveOn.org. I mean, you guys are tuned in. But for so many Americans, that they're working 50, 60 hours a week, and they're going to the beach on the weekend, and they're just saying this D.C. drama, here they go again. They're going to get it solved at the 11th hour. But if this thing goes past, and we go into prioritization, and we start looking at higher interest rates, the American people are going to rise up, and they're going to say, you're all fired. What the heck? Can't you get this done in time? And what I'm concerned about is that we will lose our opportunity to get this economy going, that we will actually take on more debt. In the effort to try to cull our debt, we could take on more debt, and we may very well set the stage for a political situation that goes back to tax, borrow, and spend. That's why you're wondering why am I supporting this bill tonight when it's not the bill I want? It's because I want to get this done so that we can move in the right direction and not fall back. That's why I want to do this, is because I think this is the best agreement that we can get a democratically controlled Senate and a president to agree to that doesn't cause all the adverse economic effects and set a political scene that actually causes to reject the hard work that needs to be. And this is hard work. To cut is hard work. But it's important work, and it certainly can be done. But the whole model could be brought under question by the American people who are not necessarily as politically attuned, but when they start to see their paycheck and they start to get laid off, I mean, we run the risk of losing the opportunity to renew our country.
Now, haven't we already seen unemployment is now at 9.2, and that's just the hard number. The soft number is something in the neighborhood of 16%.
Yeah, Spider, it's true, but I'll tell you what, if we end up going into prioritization, if we see a spike, I heard right after I got done with my call, I heard Kevin get on the line, Kevin McCashin. He started talking about 22% interest rates. Look, I just respectfully disagree. I mean, you're talking about Jimmy Carter days, and worse, actually, much worse than that. If we end up with stagflation, high inflation, high interest rates, and high unemployment as a means of trying to bring renewal, I can tell you what, that given what I know of American history, it's a whole different course. Because you know what? Before the Depression, did you ever imagine a country like ours going down the road that we did in the 1930s? Because if the answer was yes, why didn't we do it in the 1830s? Why didn't we do it in the 1870s? We didn't do it.
No, but I also didn't see the Federal Reserve becoming, an option in the first place.
Well, that came out of the panic of 1907, right? But certainly you didn't see this major expansion of the government. And I'll tell you right now, 9.2 is a very high level. The Depression, we approached 25%. If we crash this economy because we don't get this right in the next week, this unemployment level could spike significantly higher. And if it goes higher, I mean, you're looking at a mountain more of debt. And quite frankly, we're going to end up, in my view, going the way of Greece. This is why I'm very focused right now in getting this through. This agreement that we have, I'm calling it an agreement because they sat at the table with us, but it's not a foregone conclusion. It's agreement. But I can tell you what, I don't see it getting better than this. And here's why. Because I think if we end up with prioritization and all the potential adverse effects, I see this going in another direction. I just do. I don't think that I see this moving towards bigger government and everything else instead of moving towards freedom, which is the direction I want to move this.
I just got an email saying that you've got an appointment coming up. Amy Standard has another question. If she's prepared, I'd like to allow her to get it out.
Yeah, I'm going to waive off. I'm going to waive off that appointment, so we can stay on for as long as we have time.
Oh,
okay. Amy, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Thank you, Congressman, for hanging on with us. I really appreciate that. You had mentioned that you do believe that if this bill does get passed, that it's not going to go very far.
No, I am not saying that.
Well, I mean, in regards into the Senate. I mean,
I hope it. I tell you, Amy, that's not what I hope happens. I recognize that Senator Reid has said that, but he doesn't. What I think is he doesn't want to deal with a media cycle, because if he deals with the media cycle, you're going to have a lot of commonsensical Americans say, "Well, why isn't this the answer?" You clearly. I mean, look, the Republicans wouldn't have. I don't think, given the current climate, they wouldn't have put the Pell Grants. Not that we don't love education. We do. We just have a different view on it. But they wouldn't have put Pell Grant increases in their bill. I mean, that looks like it's got your fingerprints on it. Are you going to categorically deny? And then you have to deal with that question. And then they're going to say, well, the Joint Committee, that doesn't sound like something the Republicans would do. I mean, and then you'd have to be in a tough spot. And I think if we can get a media cycle behind this, I think we got a shot where pragmatic Americans go, come on, aren't you the guys that have been saying the sky's going to fall? I mean, wasn't it, who said that Social Security checks, then look, you guys helped at the table put this together. Why don't you pass it? This is what I want to see happen. I want to see this, I want to see us put the pressure on the Senate. Because remember, these guys haven't passed anything. They'll criticize us. They haven't passed a single thing. They haven't amended our stuff. They just table it. And then they want to blame us. I want the opportunity to fight this out. I want to get a chance to get it over in the Senate and to get the American people engaged behind it and say, what is so bad about this? You clearly had at least a part helping draft it. Why won't you pass it? Since you guys are the ones saying the sky's going to fall, if it's that bad, sign the bill.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, however, the perception with the obstinance from Harry Reid that we've been getting. I mean, they do have control of the bully pulpit right now. Their message is being heard. The perception right now is that the Republicans are failing, and I'm concerned about that. And I know that you are doing all that you can to combat that. My question regarding that is, if it is dead on arrival in the Senate, have you considered the Mac-Paul Penny bill at all?
I will certainly consider it. I'll take a look at it. But I got to tell you, I don't see this thing getting better. If we don't put pressure, I have my own thoughts about how this thing ends up. I think this is our best chance at getting at least down the road of where we need to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted, before Spider continues, I just wanted to remind all of our listeners that they can go to www.teamwatch.us/New York. There will be a recording of this conversation with Congressman Chris Gibson up on our website as soon as this call is over. And Spider, if you'd like to continue, I'm through with my questions.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. I did get another interesting question while the Congressman was talking. And this is interesting because you did mention the Bush tax cuts. I understand, and this came from a source that I don't feel like Googling right now. You seem to be working with Bill Owens, who wants to let the Bush tax cuts sunset. Is that true?
For me, no. Look, I mean, I said that this is we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. What I did say is that I believe so strongly in cut, cap, and balance. I mean, I just feel like if we could get the caps that get the spending under control, and if we got a balanced budget to an amendment to the Constitution for a balanced budget, then I think if we still have a revenue problem, that is to say, even with the caps that get us below a discipline level at 19.9, then I think we should put everything on the table. But as far as Bill Owens, no. I mean, we have a different philosophy on how to approach this.
Does the Department of Education come in, or maybe Department of Energy? Department of Education, for instance, the only thing it's the grades have gone down. The Department of Energy, the only thing it's accomplished is, well, paying a whole bunch of bureaucrats, and nothing's happened. These are a couple of just very right off the top of my head kind of organizations that seem to really not have any point in being.
Well, of course, it's got constituencies. You've heard my statement on this. I think we would be better, just like I would like to see us consolidate on the national security side. I think there are consolidation efforts. And although, there are those that would try to say that that's a radical idea, look, our small business owners go through this all the time. I mean, when you're so overstructured, when you have a hierarchy that's not producing effective output, you restructure. So what I'm saying is that what we want is limited and effective government. We don't want bloated, ineffective government. We want limited, effective government. And I think that we could benefit from consolidation. Just like we could consolidate the national security, I could see us consolidating the domestic side of this. Before we created the Department of Education, we had the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. That's a construct to look at consolidation. You've got Interior and Energy. I mean, there's different areas where you could look to fold in, which would therefore cut the size of the bureaucracy, which I believe would actually make it more effective, because not only effective at the federal level, but would open up more space at the state and local level. And ultimately, we would not only have more effective government, but it would be less expensive. Now, what about moving that? Look, I mean, what we're so we are locked in a major battle on the budget right now, and I've got priorities I'm working on in terms of the Armed Services and Agricultural Committee. When I'm in meetings with other members, I talk about big ideas and about where we're going. But I will tell you that we're not at the place right at this moment where we're going to be able to make that kind of. But I'm still, if you guys are following it closely in the media, I hope you see I'm still talking about this as an idea that needs to continue to be on the table. We need to have national security establishment on the table for reform. And by the way, that was important to me on this bill, on this Budget Control Act. If I would have seen defense shielded for 10 years, that I couldn't support that. Now, what they did do is for the first 2 years, for 12 and 13, they've said that defense can only vary by plus or minus 3%. So, they added $17 billion. What they can't do is they can't increase it more than 3%, and they can't decrease it more than 3% for these 2 years. After that, it's on the table. If we can get national security establishment reform, there's nothing in this Budget Act that would preclude it from occurring. The same with the bureaucracy. If we can gain the political consensus for major overhaul of the federal bureaucracy, that is not prohibited in this Budget Act.
Chris, I'm getting a whole bunch of emails right now that are not very favorable. It seems like I think I'm going to try and tie a bunch of these questions together. And what I'm going to try and do is ask you what, according to your campaign, what promises in shrinking the size of government are actually being followed in such a way that we could witness a savings? I mean, $22 billion this year, that ain't much. We spend $10 billion a day. That's 2 days' worth.
Well, I mean, look, I've already kind of went through all this. I've talked to you about my vision for national security establishment reform. I've talked about amendments that have actually gotten through and signed into law that move us towards that direction. But look, you can go back and take a look. I gave my philosophy on how I view America going forward. You're not going to find anywhere in there in my campaign promises where I said I could go to Washington and get all that done. Because, look, I'm just, that can't be done. One member out of 435, there is a consensus that needs to occur. When you're president, you can actually you can make some of these proposals and then try to get the Congress to move along. But if you're communicating that somewhere during the campaign that I thought I was going to wave a magic wand and the department was going to go away, is that your question, or what exactly is your question?
Well, no. Again, I'm trying to roll 10 different questions into one, and it's apparently a little too generic, and that's fine. I was wrong to attempt it in the first place. My gosh. Okay. $22 billion in spending cuts this year. We're talking about, if that stays, it's $100 billion annually, blah, blah, blah. We know it comes out to $900 billion. And $25 trillion at the end of 10 years. Shouldn't there be more cuts than that?
Of course. The answer is of course, Spider. But again, for all the listeners out there, I would bring your attention to a very simple fact. We control one half of 1/3 of the government. And remember, this is the same audience that reveres the United States Constitution. I mean, you revere it, and I do too. And if you think that we can come down here and by fiat implement stuff, think again, because that's not the way the founders set up our government. We have communicated where we stand. Look at the cut, cap, and balance bill. That's what we view as the solution. If we controlled the Senate and the White House, it would be law. We don't control the Senate and the White House. And so what we're trying to do is bring together an agreement within our Madisonian constitutional design that will become law. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you talk about results, what matters is what we can get this Madisonian system to implement. If you want to know what we stand for, look at what we passed. The cut, cap, and balance is what we believe is the solution to the problem. But we just are not able to wave a wand and say, there you have it. So if anyone wants to debate me on that, I would really enjoy that debate. But you tell me how within a Madisonian constitutional design that happens. And if your answer is, let go to prioritization and go to Jimmy Carter stagflation because we want high inflation and we want high unemployment, then we're going to disagree. I'll just tell you right now, we're going to disagree because I refuse to accept 22% interest rates and 15-20% unemployment as the means to renewal. I don't accept that. Is it possible I'm wrong? Of course it's possible I'm wrong, but I don't believe it. Because if I believe that, I wouldn't be here right now fighting for the good. I wouldn't be here if I thought that was the answer. I'd still be back. In fact, I'd probably still be in the Army if I didn't think I was going to be doing that. I came here to make a difference, to grow this economy, and to begin to move us back towards a balanced budget and to protect our freedoms. That's what I believe.
Well, thank you for that. I've been trying to concentrate on the budgetary questions that I've been getting. I do have a number of other questions. You mentioned the War Powers Act. I've been asked, and I know the answer to this, but I think they want to hear you say it. Your support of Israel concerning the War Power. I'm going to preface this with concerning the War Powers Reform Act because I already know the answer. But again, I was asked, so I figured I'd let you.
That's a good question. And for the listeners that may not have a full perspective on it, I mean, I've got this War Powers Reform Act. It's H.R. 1609. Look it up. I think we got about 17 co-sponsors right now. It is a fundamental reform. The biggest issue we're having with the War Powers Act is there's a major loophole in its interpretation. Although I would tell you, I would argue legally it's not the case. There is a wide belief here that the president can deploy forces into imminent danger for up to 60 days, and anything beyond 60 days, he has to have authorization, and if he doesn't get authorization, then he has to redeploy the troops. And he can get up to 30 more days, depending on the urgency of the situation, to get them out. What we've done in the War Powers Reform Act is we've said look, there are certain circumstances when the president, acting as our commander-in-chief, may deploy forces. If we're attacked, and this, by the way, is leaning on not only the Constitution, but interpreting the Constitution by reading the notes on the constitutional debate that occurred that Madison gave to us, and then also reading the Federalist Papers, which were the essays that were written by Madison, Hamilton, and Jay to try to convince the various states to ratify it. And when you look at it, they talk about the president in his role of the commander-in-chief, and they try to provide assurances to people like Patrick Henry and others who were concerned that he was going to become an emperor, a dictator, or a king. And you'll see particularly in Federalist Paper 69, and you'll see Hamilton discussing that. That's important because Hamilton was he was the big government guy, if you want to call it that, among the three. I mean, Madison and Jay more circumspect in terms of how much power they wanted to give to the federal government. But Hamilton, even the sort of the energy in the executive guy, he wrote Federalist Paper 70 as well. But in 69, he's trying to communicate what the powers of the new president should the Constitution be ratified. And what he said is he compares and contrasts the new president in relation to the King of England and the governor of New York. And what he says is he will act as our first general, our first admiral. He will have the power to command the forces, but he will not have the power to commit us to war. So, I mean, I use that to say that, look, if we're attacked, and you look at also other parts of the notes on the Constitution, there's a full expectation that the president can defend us as our commander-in-chief, as our first general, if we're attacked. If we're in imminent threat of attack, not talking about the lead up to Iraq, no, that's not the imminent threat we're talking about. We're talking about if we gain intelligence that an attack like 9/11 is imminent, is in the process of occurring. The president can act to defend us. That's number one. Number two is a declaration of war. That comes explicitly from the Constitution. The third is an authorization, a law that comes from the Congress authorizing him to use force. And now, there are some that say, well, that's not in the Constitution. Well, that's true, but also the Constitution gives the power to the Congress to authorize, to raise and maintain armies, to support a navy, and to provide direction to the commander-in-chief, to write the laws. And as important is if you look at the first generation of leaders that wrote the Constitution and then lived it, you'll see that that's what they did. You'll see that in 1797 with Adams, and then in 1802 with Jefferson. The first situation with regard to France on the high seas, and then the second one with regard to Jefferson with the Barbary pirates. In those circumstances, we did not declare war, but the Congress authorized force. So those are the three circumstances when the president may move as the commander-in-chief, move troops into hostilities. If in the War Powers Reform Act, if those circumstances are not met, the president has to come to the Congress first, or, this is what's key, he may not authorize or expend funds. See, that's the difference in the War Powers Reform Act, is he doesn't get 60 days and then he has to come for authorization, because what always happens? The presidents always say, well, they're there now, just like they did in Libya. I mean, swear to God, it's the same stuff they said in Libya. Well, they're on the ground now, or they're in the sea, not far from on the ground. You got to support them. This is what the presidents, regardless of party, have done every time. And this is what we're trying to change in the War Powers Reform Act. Now, the specific question had to do with Israel. And look, we do not have a defense agreement with Israel right now, and it is my belief that the sense in this Congress is that there is a will to support Israel in the event that they were attacked. And so what we have written in to the War Powers Reform Act is that to agree to the War Powers Reform Act is to give the president the authorization to respond if Israel is attacked. So that's the provision that's in the War Powers Reform Act. It doesn't require him to do it. It gives him the authorization. If Israel is attacked, like a country like Iran, then the president would be authorized. Now, what's different is when you heard me say about our country, I said that what's written in the bill is that if we're attacked or if we're in imminent threat of attack. With regard to Israel, it only says attacked. Like if Iran was to attack Israel, the president would be authorized to use military force to support our friend and ally. I'm ready for a follow-up if somebody wants to follow up on that, whoever asked that question.
I haven't gotten one specifically on that. I've gotten them on other things, but I'm going to try and stay closer to on topic.
Can I say one thing, though, before you get there, Spider? Because
sure,
I sense that there's some people who sent in emails and the cut, cap, and balance. What I would ask folks who are writing that in is tell me how that, I mean, and I know this is a bit rhetorical because they're not going to be able to do this, but for those that are of the mind, well, cut, cap, and balance is the ideal bill, and we should just stand on that. I'm asking folks who believe that to play the chess game out. Tell me how that ends. We demand, they tabled it. They voted to table it, and then we take no action. Now, of course, we would argue that they need to amend it or do something, but tell me how that ends. Because I'll tell you, I've done that chess game. I played that out, and it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well for hardworking Americans, and it doesn't end well for us as we continue to to do the good work to try to restore our republic. As far as the majority, that's what I'm telling you, is that what we have to do is we have to get something done. It's not enough to just stand on something. We need to actually get it implemented.
Well, I think now here's one I'm going to just throw out myself. Isn't that kind of demagoguing, the thing that's kind of hamstrung all of our government in the first place?
How isn't that demagoguing? How's that demagoguing?
Well, by saying that you either follow our plan, vote for our plan, or you're not getting anything. And you know what I'm saying?
No, I do know what you're saying. No, that's exactly it. I mean, this is classical. I think you're right on that. We communicated where we are when we passed, and what I tried to do was get on the airwaves, and I reinforced the fact that 5 Democrats voted for this too. We passed what was a bipartisan bill, the cut, cap, and balance. It was the solution to the problem, and the Senate chose to, and I have to tell you, I mean, I think Harry Reid was a little scared of it because, like I said, he flipped on it really quickly. He said he was going to have a full debate, and then he decided, no, we're going to table it, which was a bit of a political risk for him because he needed 51 votes to do it. So if just 3 Democrats would have abandoned him, he would have lost that vote, and then they would have had to debate it. And I think if we would have debated it, I think we had a good chance. But given the fact that they tabled it, what I thought was incumbent upon us is we need to find, well, if that's not going to work, then what will work? What are you, since you've been elected by the American people, and we have to respect that within our Constitution, what is it within the concepts? What is it within the framework of cut, cap, and balance that you are willing to live with? And that's what animated the conversations and the negotiations that took place last weekend.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Is Pakistan, or the non-invasion of Pakistan, the $200 billion that we would be spending if we had invaded Pakistan, is that involved in any of these budget battle conversations? I'm
not aware that it is. You may know that I voted no. I voted to strip. I should say I voted yes to strip that funding. Those amendments did not pass. There were 2 amendments in the DOD appropriations bill to strip about, I think they were each $100 billion. I could have the staff go back and look. But there were 2 amendment votes on Pakistan to strip funding. And I voted to do that. I mean, I recognize, believe me, I thought through this very carefully, but it is my belief that from a full perspective that we should not be giving that aid to Pakistan given the things that have occurred here in the last 3 to 4 months.
Thank you. Did you at some point claim that the insurgents or quote-unquote freedom fighters in Libya are actually Al-Qaeda members, and we're supporting Al-Qaeda by helping those people? No,
I have read those accounts. I've seen other people write about those accounts. What I've said, if you go back and see what I've said on it, is we don't know who these guys are. What I've said is that, and by the way, I get that from testimony. I had a chance to be with Secretary Gates, and we asked him, what do we know about these guys? And Secretary Gates said, other than the top 8, not much. We don't know much about them. So, there you have it. Now, more careful than that when it comes to, I don't have firsthand knowledge. I have not been on the ground there. I read everything I can, but I have not communicated that it is al-Qaeda, although I've certainly read the reports. I've seen the reports that some people allege that to be so.
Okay.
And by the way, on the topic of Libya, I thought it was a big mistake.
I was going to get there. I just was trying to avoid it till later, but please go ahead.
Well, it was a big mistake. We shouldn't have done it. On so many levels, it was a problem. We didn't have a clear end state. This is a circumstance where the president communicated a political goal and a military goal, and they were not harmonized. My read of history is anytime you do that, you're inviting failure. That's on a strategic level. On an international relations level, I think it's bad policy. I want to see us stop doing this. I want to see us discipline ourselves going forward, that we refashion ourselves and conduct ourselves like a republic and not an empire. On a constitutional level, I think we have a severe issue here of overreach on the part of the executive, and that's part of what I want to address on the part in the War Powers Reform Act. So, I mean, on the tactical, on the strategic, on the international, on the political level, this is just wrong-headed policy. I have voted. Every vote that I've taken on Libya has been to end the operation, whether it's been on authorization or on appropriation, and I'll continue to do that going forward.
That's great, because you led me into the next one on Libya of not you specifically because of the way your specific vote went, but I'm going to go with Congress on this one. The first vote said that no, you don't have the power to be in Libya, but then the next vote was we'll go ahead and keep funding it.
No, that's right. I mean, now, in all fairness,
doesn't that send mixed messages?
I think so. I do.
Are you?
I think it sends mixed messages. But in all fairness to Ron Paul, I mean, this is an issue we disagreed on. I thought the right thing to do was to deny him authorization and then to cut off funding. Ron Paul had a different perspective on it. He thought that even though we were going to cut off the combat funding, which, by the way, the commanders assessed is that it would have ended the operation, because the exceptions that were in that amendment did not include suppression of enemy air defense, or otherwise known as SEAD. And because it didn't have SEAD, the commanders would have no-go'd the mission because it would have been too high risk to do it. As Dennis Kucinich said in his wrap-up, he said, all the more reason, these guys who were arguing against the amendment just gave you the reason to vote for it, because it's going to end the operation in Libya. But, look, honest people can disagree on this. Ron Paul took another view. He thought that by voting to cut off the funding, he was backdoor authorizing it. I said to him, look, any chance that I get to take away the funding for this, I'm going to vote for it. Was I happy with the wording of that amendment? Of course not. And that's why I went to the floor. It's on. You can take a look at that testimony that I gave on the floor of the House of Representatives. I said that. I said, this is not the amendment that I wanted to vote on. But I'm going to vote for it because it cuts off funding for offensive operations in Libya. And the testimony from the commanders was that it was essentially going to end the operation. And I wish that would have passed. That amendment failed. The amendment that expressed disapproval for the Operation Libya passed, but then we did not cut off the funding. That's, I think, you're pointing to. You're pointing to the mixed messages of Congress. And by the way, I have to tell you, before that second vote was taken, I went around trying to whip votes using that same argumentation. I said, we are going to send mixed messages. Now, the counter argument was, they said, yeah, but when you read the details, I said, look, how do you think this is going to play? I mean, when this reports in CNN and Fox News, and it's going to look like we're schizophrenic on the issue. And they said, well, I said, my goodness, let's cut the funding. Let's cut the funding. And we lost, and unfortunately, the headlines came out just as you communicated it.
Okay, that wasn't very pleasant.
No, but now we're not done. But I would tell you that because of the whole situation here, On the debt ceiling, we're not done with the Libyan piece either. I mean, that's going to have to be addressed. My efforts are really running along the lines of the War Powers Reform Act, and then there are others that are leading, like Justin Amash and Dennis Kucinich and others that are working on once again the deauthorization of the mission, and actually the defunding of the operations. Okay.
Is there anything that you could, knowing how the constituents who supported you the most strongly, and this would be, I suppose, the Tea Party, I guess, whoever those people happen to be, the people who supported you the most strongly, is there anything you could say to them that you think would help win them over and maybe help convince people on the other side of the aisle that the votes you're giving are the proper votes and you should not be primaried in this next election?
Well, look, I mean, I'll tell you that I don't worry about elections when I do my work down here. I do my level best. I read everything. I remember what I've heard all throughout the district, the 137 towns. I believe the message was loud and clear: work on job creation, deficit reduction, and protection of freedoms. I was always very clear on this, that if you believed in those three goals, whether you're a Republican, an independent, a conservative, a Tea Party movement follower, or a Democrat looking for a better way, you were welcome in our camp. And that's what I do every day down here. We do all that legislatively. We work constituent work. I feel very comfortable that I've done that every step of the way. I think I've been very clear to the audience here today that cut, cap, and balance was desirable. It was the solution. It didn't pass the Senate. I have to live in the world as I see it. I work for the ideal world, but I have to recognize reality that I'm in. And I would tell you that, to me, to move into prioritization and to see us move down that road, I thought would be bad for the country, bad for our district, and ultimately bad for our agenda, what we want to get done. And that's why I got to tell you, I am not part of the whip team because I relish my independence. For anybody who studies these things, there's a website on the Washington Post. You can see that next to Ron Paul and Justin Amash, I think I'm the most independent of any Republican down there. You can take a look at it. I may be off by one, but there are 242 Republicans down here, and I think I'm either the third or fourth most independent. So I relish not being part of the whip team because I'm on agriculture, armed services, and on policy, because I put my focus on policy down here to extend the reach for positive impact for the district. But on this issue, on this vote tonight, I thought it was important that we get the best agreement going forward that comports with the principles and the framework of cut, cap, and balance. So I helped. I worked with about a half dozen members, and I tried to explain to them, look, I get it. I know it's not ideal, but where does this go from here? And that's my message to everyone out there. I mean, look, if you want to, it's a simple question. What is the solution out there? We all agree on that. The question is, what happens when we don't get that? What happens? Play that out in your mind. And if you think the answer is default is fine, or hey, we got $200 billion coming in, and we can always just pay some bills and not others. Let me say some things about that. First of all, you subject yourself to the downgrade and all the adverse effects that go along with it. The other piece of this is, do you really trust the Obama administration to get that right? I don't. Now, that's not a partisan statement. I don't think the Bush administration could have got that right. This government has grown so large, they don't even have situational awareness on what they're doing. If they try to move into prioritization, you need to think about the details of that. Think of how many times we would be sued, left, right, and center, every single day for breach of contract. Oh, didn't realize about that bill. Do you know how many different vendors, there have been estimates of 8 million checks that have to go out, and I'm not talking about, I'm talking about full spectrum, contract, vendors, what have you. 8 million. And what confidence do I have that the administration's going to get that right? And if they don't get that right, what are our legal requirements attendant to that? Unknown. Unknown. I have no idea, and I couldn't even begin to tell you, but I know one thing. It ain't good. So that's why I believed in moving forward. And I want to tell you one more thing. It's kind of obvious, but I want to say it anyways. Part of the reason why we're having trouble tonight getting the necessary votes to do what's right is because we got members down here who are afraid to get on the phone and doing what I'm doing with you right now. They would rather vote no than stand or before you or get on the phone and tell you why we need to do what's right and get this done for this country. And I didn't come down here to shirk my responsibility. What I'm doing here is right. It's right for the 20th Congressional District in New York, and it's right for the United States of America. I believe in that with every fiber of my body. That's why I'm glad to have this opportunity to communicate that to you. And if anybody doubts that, think it through. You tell me, and I'm willing to listen. Think it through strategically. How does this go forward? And you tell me how we get there from here. And maybe I'll be, because you know what? I'm wrong from time to time, and I think some of you know me well. I'll admit it. When I'm wrong, I'll admit it, but I don't see it right now, and I'm willing to learn. I'm trying to get us the best agreement we can that comports with cut, cap, and balance and gets this country moving in the right direction and doesn't move towards prioritization, higher interest rates, more unemployment, and more debt on my kids and on your kids. That's what I'm here to do, and that's why I'm voting yes on this damn bill if we can get it to the floor. And I wish I had more of my colleagues that would have phone calls like this so they could communicate clearly why we need to do what's right for our country.
Thank you, Congressman Gibson. I really appreciate that. I do appreciate your independence that you have shown, your leadership, and your courage for standing up to your own party and to the other party. A lot of your constituents do appreciate it, too. We know your job is not easy. Some of us feel sorry that we actually got you into office because we know that you are under a lot of pressure and that you are doing a lot of hard work.
Oh, I'm honored to do it. I'm passionate. You can tell I'm passionate about it, but don't think I don't love you. I do love you. I love every one of you guys.
We appreciate the passion.
And I'm fine with this. Believe me. I'm passionate because of what's at stake. But as far as, I'm doing just fine. The family's doing great. Everything's fine that way. I am passionate about because I think this is a pivotal moment in our country, and we got to get this right. We got to get this right. There's so much at stake. But thank you for those kind words, Amy. But believe me, it's a privilege. It's an honor and a privilege to serve you.
Well, thank you. We do, again, we appreciate it, and we are honored to have you working so hard on our behalf. There are people who are quite as passionate about this budget situation as you are that are listening tonight. Not only are they passionate, but a lot of us are worried and concerned. Is there something, could you end our phone conference with a little bit of hope that you see coming down the line?
Well, yeah, thank you for that. I would tell you that what we will do is, as I'm sitting here talking to you now, and the fact that it's 9:21 and I haven't been called down to vote, I don't view that as a good sign right now. But I will tell you that we are going to continue to work this because, again, I think it's the way forward for us. But I will tell you this too, that if for some reason this doesn't work out, we will not quit. We will keep working hard. We know what the ideal is, and we will not tire, and we will stay steadfast and true. And that when we move forward, that these bills, that these agreements, even though we understand we have to work with Democrats in the Senate and with the President, they will comport with cut, cap, and balance, which is the way forward. It's the solution to our problem. We know we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, and we need to cut the spending and get it back below 19%, and then ultimately get a balanced budget amendment so that our children don't end up back in the same spot. So other than that, I don't have the answer for you right now as to how this all plays out, other than I think it's important that we just continue to work it. But I will tell you this, it's very important, I think, that we keep the dialogue going. I certainly have no expectation that we're going to agree on all things, and as you can see tonight, we don't, and that's fully understandable. I just thank God that we have America waking up. I mean, be candid. 5 years ago, I don't know how many people we have on the line here, but 5 years ago, how many of you would have, been doing this on an evening? And we've all spent, a couple hours together? I would say the answer wasn't that many. But the fact that you're paying attention, the fact that you're engaged, is making our country stronger right now. And if you think you're not making a difference, I mean, I know that there's some people and they're saying, my goodness, we got trillions we got to do. If you think you're not making a difference, take a look at a year ago. The whole conversation has changed, and it didn't happen by chance. The whole conversation changed because of you getting involved in this process. That's why we're in this impasse right now. We have raised the debt ceiling 74 times in my lifetime. This is the first time there's ever been any cuts associated with it. I pray God that we're successful, that that's actually the case, and I believe it will be. And then there's the real potential for structural change for the first time ever. That wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. And that's because of what you're doing. So if you think that you're frustrated and you're not making a difference, I would tell you think again. You're making a difference. And it's been an honor to be with you tonight. It's an honor to serve you. We'll keep these lines open of communication. And I certainly welcome your feedback. Probably the best way to do it, I hate to lay this on you, Spider and Amy, but I know that there are people that have views. Continue to do what you're doing. Send your recommendations, your analysis, your thoughts, your expletives, whatever you want to do. Send them to Spider and Amy, and they can compile it all, and they can get them to me for my due consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Congressman. And Spider, thank you. Thank you for moderating, and thank everyone for joining us tonight. And we will continue to keep the lines open through TeamWatch New York.
Okay. God bless everyone. Take care.
Thank you.